We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to The Anadromist. This is Burn Power, coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia, on a perfect day. And I've been inside working on things, but I'm enjoying it nonetheless. And today what we're going to do is we're going to discuss, well, I'm not going to discuss anything. This isn't about me. This is another series of prophetic voices from the past. Naturally, any voice I play for you is from the past. And these voices are unusual because sometimes they are anonymous. Other times we have the voices of film directors and poets and fashion designers and soldiers. They all share one thing in common. I believe, well, not all of them. There are a couple that are still alive, but they're all older. Or they come from a time so long ago as to be completely different than the world we live today. Or they're remembering things so completely different from our world. C.S. Lewis discusses the idea that the past has rights. And that when reading the past, they comment on us just as we comment on them. And he said the future would be the same if we could get to those voices. But unfortunately, they aren't here yet. But these voices are all making comments in one way or another on the world that they saw developing, the world that has developed, the world we didn't want to develop. There's a particularly touching interview with a man who fought in World War II. And he breaks down in tears because he says, this wasn't the world we fought to save. And it really isn't. You know, the world we are now all living in is not anybody's idea of why they were fighting to stop Hitler or Stalin or that was the Cold War, but still. We find ourselves in a very strange world. But I want these voices from the past to speak for themselves. So I'm not going to come in between each of them and say much or anything. I'm going to let their voices speak. I am going to put a little title card between each one to let you know who it is. But in many cases, they are unknown. They're just... I just collect these things. I collect voices from the past, particularly when they seem to express something that I think I need to hear. And if I need to hear it, maybe you do too. So I'm going to share these things with you. And I hope you get something out of it. Sometimes the recordings are old, and you'll have to really strain to listen. Not super. I mean, if you can speak English, or if you get in real trouble, put on the CC button and the closed caption button, then you can follow it that way. But other times it's just what they're saying. It's not within the realm of our experience, and that's what's so important about it. And C.S. Lewis again said that often we hear someone in the past talking. They seem to be on opposite sides, but to us, they're all on the same side. And I think the same is true as if they look at us, we seem to be on opposing sides often. But actually, we're all stuck in this thing. And one way to enlarge the parameters of our discussion is to allow people, particularly older people from the past, talk. And so these are the voices of antiques, antique human beings. So, let's go. Oh, before we click it on, help people find this, share it with other people, subscribe to the channel, do it now, and contribute to the channel, please. It would be helpful if you have a few spare dimes. There is a link down below. Dimes. People in a lot of country don't understand it. That's 10 cents. Okay, $1. It's a few spare dollars. Contribute. Thanks. And now, voices from the past.
Now let's meet someone who can bring a little history to us. Her name is Mrs. Florence Pannell, and she's 108 years old. Unlike most women of her time, Florence Pannell managed to set up her own beauty care business. She worked for many years in Paris and in London, and she knows a great deal about fashion. Florence, tell me, was it all right for a lady to show her ankle?
In Paris, nothing mattered. But I'm speaking of years before that. Years. When I suppose I was about 10.
Yes.
There was a cartoon in Punch of the old-fashioned bus with the seats going parallel with the bus. And all the men going like this.
Yes. What were they looking for?
There was a woman crossing the road and holding her dress up and showing her ankle to there.
Tut. Florence,
Yes.
tell me a bit about how you managed to start your own beauty business.
No lady worked in those days. It was only a companion or a teacher. She could be a hospital nurse. But not private.
So it was difficult.
Oh, for women, shockingly difficult. I can tell you a story about that. That was also, I think, in Punch. A scraggy woman seated in a chair, little girl playing on the floor, about 4 years old, and an awful-looking man this side in an armchair. Mother, when I grow up, shall I have to be married? Yes, dear. Shall I have to marry a man like father? Yes, dear. And if I don't marry him, shall I be an old maid like Aunt Eliza? Yes, dear. Silence for a minute. Say, Mother, it's a hard world for us women, isn't it?
Have you ever been in an aeroplane?
Never.
Would you like to?
I shouldn't mind now, but I wouldn't when they first came in. I never fancied them. But I would now because I'm more venturesome.
I think you've been very adventurous right through your life. What's the biggest change of all you've seen?
The biggest change? Everything. Nothing is the same. Everything is changed.
I was born in 1872. My parents died when I was still an infant, and so I was brought up by my grandparents.
Can you tell us something about your grandfather?
Yes, I can tell you something about my grandfather. He was born in the early years of the French Revolution. He was a member of Parliament while Napoleon was still on the throne. In common with all the Whig followers of Fox, he thought English hostility to Napoleon was excessive, and he visited Napoleon in Elba. He was It was he who introduced the Reform Bill in 1832, which started England on the road towards democracy. He was Prime Minister during the Mexican War, during the revolutions of 1848. I remember him quite well, but as you can see, he belonged to an age that now seems rather remote. And the world where I was young was a solid world. A world where all kinds of things that have now disappeared were thought to be going to last forever. It didn't dawn on people that they would cease. English people certainly regarded English naval supremacy as a sort of law of nature. Britannia ruled the waves. It didn't occur to us that that might stop. Never thought.
Even with Bismarck?
Bismarck was regarded as a rascal and was thought of as a sort of uneducated farmer. But it was assumed that the influence of Goethe and Schiller would gradually bring Germany back to a more civilized point of view. And moreover, we thought of Germany as only a land power. Germany had at that time no navy. We weren't at all afraid of Germany. In fact, liberal opinion was more favorable to Germany than to France at that time. Bismarck himself compared Germany and England to an elephant and a whale, each formidable in its own element, but no danger to each other. And that was how we felt, so we were not afraid of Bismarck at all. It was thought that there was going to be ordered progress throughout the world. Gradually, every country was going to take to parliaments. There was going to be a bicameral legislature and two parties, and it was all going to be exactly like England everywhere, all over the world. My grandmother used to laugh because one time she said to the Russian ambassador, "Perhaps someday you will have a parliament in Russia." And he said, "God forbid, my dear Lady Russell." Except for the first word, the Russian ambassador at the present day might give the same answer. But that was the assumption. It was all going to be orderly, all quite nice. The atmosphere, apart from politics, was one of Puritan piety, very great piety, very great austerity. We always had family prayers at 8, and before family prayers I had to do half an hour's practice at the piano, which I hated. Although there were 8 servants in the house, the food was always of the utmost simplicity. And even of what there was, if there was anything at all nice, I wasn't allowed to have it, because it wasn't good for children to eat nice things. For instance, there would be rice pudding and apple tart. Grown-ups had the apple tart, and I had the rice pudding. And there was extreme austerity in all those ways. My grandmother, until she was over 70, would never sit in an armchair until after dinner. Ever.
Why, I don't exactly call it work. You know what work is? You don't. Why, work's doing something you have to do. When you're doing something that you want to do, like to do, that's play. Now, a good many years ago, I don't like to tell you quite how many, but, well, I was born in the first half of the last century, so you can guess how old I am. I worked. And now I'm in the, pretty well along in the next century, and now I exercise a little, but I don't call it work. I don't call this work. Why, this is play. You see how nice that is?
You've seen many things happen, change in your day, Mr. King?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. We live in a world of change. The trees are just the same as they were when I was a boy, only larger. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But when I was a boy, we didn't have the telegraph, and we didn't have the telephone, of course, nor the electric lights, nor any of these other things which have come up to bother us and help us. The good old days were pretty good. Don't you boys think that you're living in just the best time in the world's history? It's first rate. but it's no better than our fathers had, and I don't believe it's very much better than our grandchildren. Yes, that's Hudson over there. Nice little city. Why, I remember very well looking out of my window, I would see anywhere from 10 to 20, hardly ever less than 10 sailing vessels on the river. And now I don't see more than 1 in 3 months. And very few steamboats. Everybody went to New York then if they wanted to go in Duluth style. Why, they take a steamboat. If they want to go cheap, they go on one of our river sloops.
I'm going to introduce you to a rather remarkable man. He's Mr. Michael Fitzpatrick from Killarney, Maynooth. Now, he started to draw the old age pension in 1927, and 7 years ago he got the President's Bounty on his 100th birthday. Now, he's from County Clare. He came up from Clare in 1940 to a land commission farm in Maynooth, where he lives now. You have seen a lot of changes, Mr. Fitzpatrick, in farming. What would you say was the biggest change?
Well, machinery.
And what sort of a machine would you think that made the biggest impression?
Well, the reaper and binder is a great one, but by God, the one for cutting up the ground and throwing a crop is a powerful one too.
Well, you were saying at the time you saw the mowing machine first, it made a tremendous impression on you.
It did, because it didn't know how could it be done at all.
What was the reaction of the people at that time to the mowing machine, Mr.
A great many of them wasn't minding it and could afford it, but more of them got at it.
And some of them, I think you told me, wouldn't have it on the land at all.
Well, that man that had a good farm, but I said about our town's land, he wouldn't allow it in it. He used to pay an inch to cut it at 3 and 6 pence a day.
Do you remember cutting the harvest with the reaping hook?
Oh, it was all of it. Cut for years and years and years, nothing else about cutting.
And how do you think that the reaping hook compares with the combine at the present time?
Oh, well, there's an awful difference. An awful difference, I see anyway. Because the combine is just going one start of the day, is a reaper and binder wouldn't be enough mice.
Now, you also remember, I think, a rather historic thing in the land history of this country, the Bowdyke evictions.
I know.
Could you describe for us what happened at those evictions? You were at them.
I was at one of them for about 5 hours. One day.
And what happened?
That was very cruel. They threw out children and women on the road. Well, there was one of them thrown out one day I was in it, and the baby was only about 3 days old. And they were thrown on the bank of the Wofford Valley. It was cruel.
And how about the type of food you had to eat at that time, Mr. Fitzpatrick? What did you live on?
Well, we had to live on there a long time on an Indian made and flour.
I've never been lonely. I've always been a happy woman. Made me life. If I've had no grub to eat, I've gone without. But I've always had the door open to me. It was a very, very hard living. But we got through. We got through all right. And things now is clover to us. Now we're old, us old people, it's clover to us. It's like living in clover now. So sometimes the old people grumble now about how they're living, but they shouldn't do, because they're well off. The old people are well off today to what them days was. Them days, you was poked into a workhouse. A workhouse. In them days. Better see Victoria Dwellings on all, honey. Don't you worry. Oh, this is Buckingham Palace to it. We never had a bath down there. You could never bath there. You used to have to bath one leg 1 week in the pail, the next week the other leg in the pail, our toilets was in the middle of the road. And you all had to line up. And the first one got there was lucky. If not, he had to come back or her and block their copybook anywhere in the buildings. But this here, lovely bath every day. Here, you don't know where you are. That's why I'm getting such a good complexion since I've been here. Bath every day. I don't expect the old Queen so well off as what we are here with the nice flats. I don't expect she is. I expect she's got her quarters up there. Oh, yes. I'm contented. I'm never lonely. And you know, I get into trouble because I tell all the old people. They say to me, ain't you lonely? No, I said, pack that up. Lonely? I'm not lonely. It's just what you make it. You've got to make your own company, I said, and you've got to speak and not let your brain go to sleep and dance and get ready for the next world. Go up there when he's ready for you. He'll have you. Don't worry. I said, you're all gone to sleep since you've left Victoria Dwellings. And so they have. All the people that come out of Victoria Dwellings seem to have turned dopey. And they're old men too. Their old men won't speak to one another. If you look at them and speak to them, they go like this, like the horses go. Look, like the old horses used to go. Look out their blinkers to see if you're looking at them.
I can't help you both in simultaneously, but that's the way it goes. Now, ladies, if you'll close in as close to me as you can, we'd like to find out what your names are and where you are from. We'll start with you, please.
I am Miss Delia Harris from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Miss Delia Harris of Knoxville, Tennessee. And your name, please?
Bertie Harris from Knoxville, Tennessee.
This is Miss Bertie Harris of Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, this secret of theirs, I want to tell you, sounds on the surface of it almost impossible. I assure you it has been documented, and we'll explain it later on. So, Miss Bertie and Miss Delia Harris, if you'll whisper your secret to me, we'll show it at the same time to the folks at home. And here we go. Now, panel, to help classify the Harris sisters' secret, the clue concerns a relative of theirs. And, Henry, we'll start with you, I think, please.
Miss Delia Harris, is this relative of yours a famous man?
I think our opinion would be that he individually was not famous, no.
Well, was he part of a famous family?
No, that's not quite it. When we say famous, we mean somebody whose name we can say and you would immediately recognize. The answer there again is no.
You related to nobody? Were you related to somebody? Well, I mean, as part of a secret, it must be somebody we recognize one way or another. No?
Not necessarily.
Well, you said in the beginning it's almost unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
And it concerns a relative?
Yes.
Well, is it a woman?
No.
Well, it is a man?
Yes.
Well, does the man have a title like he was the first to do something, or...
No.
All right, with $20 down, a little knowledge gained, and I don't blame you. It's tough. We go to Carol Burnett, please.
He was the last to do something. Was he your brother?
No.
Your father?
No.
Your husband?
No.
You were both married to the same man.
My name is Miss.
I pass.
Too late.
I've gotten to know these two ladies. You don't get much past them. $40 down, $40 to go. We go, please, to Bill Cullen.
Father, brother, husband have been mentioned. Uncle, possibly?
No.
Blood relative?
Yes.
Cousin?
No.
Grandfather?
Yes.
You both have the same grandmaster.
Well, how about that? Both of these sisters have the same grandfather.
Is that right? Right? No?
Remember, friends, you heard it here first.
It was a rhetorical question. Your grandfather did something, did he, in which we're interested?
Yes. Now, this is where we get back to your original area. It is not the gentleman himself whose name remains famous. It was the event with which he was connected.
Was it a
What he
famous
did.
Civil War event? Civil War event.
$60 down, $20 to go. What'd you say, Bill?
Civil War event.
No.
No. All right, we go to Betsy Palmer, please.
Well, Miss Birdie and Miss Delia, is it something that has to do with the state of Tennessee?
No.
Does it have something to do with Washington, D.C., as far as our government is concerned?
No.
It hasn't.
Oh, you scared me then.
Does it have something to do with the state of Washington?
No.
Washington himself?
No.
No.
Indirectly?
Really?
Well,
Miss Delia says no. What do you say, Miss Birdie?
Indirectly.
Indirectly.
All right, we've lost the $80. Henry thinks he knows what it is.
This is a very remote possibility, and I'm going to do this wrong because I got the years wrong. Was your grandfather the grandson of Washington?
No. Panel, I told you that this secret sounded impossible, and you may need a pencil and paper to follow it, but I doubt it. The secret that Miss Birdie and Miss Delia Harris share is that their grandfather, now understand this, their grandfather was a soldier in the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War, of course, being from 1776 to 1781. Miss Delia, when was your grandfather, Simon Harris, born?
He was born in 1766.
Well, now that would have made him 10 years old when the Revolutionary War began. He didn't get in at the age of 10. How old was he when he got in?
12. He entered as a fifer.
Uh-huh. He entered not as a soldier, but as a fifer, but subsequently he did see action, didn't he?
Yes, he was at Valley Forge with Washington's army, and then he was at Cornwallis surrender at Yorktown.
In fact, his name is on the monument at Yorktown. Now, this is just unbelievable to think. My grandfather, be able to say my grandfather was in the Revolutionary War. Now, here's where you might need a pencil and paper to follow this. Find out how only 2 generations separate these ladies from the American Revolution. Simon Harris, their grandfather, was married in 1796, and he had 10 children. His youngest child, and the father of these 2 ladies, was born in 1818. So, by the way, if it isn't amazing enough that their grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War, let me tell you also that their father was too old to fight in the Civil War. Now, their father was married twice. He had 10 children by his first marriage, and 3 children by his second marriage when he was in his 70s. And of those 3 children, these 2 ladies are of those 3, and also another sister, Mary Lou, who is watching the show at home. Miss Delia, that's a pretty large and complicated family, isn't it?
Rather.
As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting to know that Miss Bertie and Miss Delia have nieces and nephews who are older than they are. Isn't that true, Miss Bertie?
Very true.
Well, Miss Delia and Miss Bertie Harris, I want to thank you so much for sharing your secret with us tonight. Your money and your Bristol-Myers gift package will be waiting for you backstage. It's been a rare privilege. Now, panel, inasmuch as the Mrs. Harris have been content to leave the stage, I'm going to have to ask you to be equally cooperative. Go to the soundproof room, if you will. We'll call you back as soon as ever we can.
Tell you the truth, when I think of it today, I don't know how I'm living.
I remember that just as well. Look like to me, I can.
Been slaves all our lives, and mother was a slave, sister was a slave, father was a slave.
They know nothing about reading right there. All that I know, they teach you to mind your master and your missus. Mama and them didn't know where to go. You see, after freedom go, just like he turned something out, you know. Didn't know where to go.
My name is Fountain Hughes. I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson. My grandfather was 115 years old when he died. And now I am 101 years old. Some people didn't have no beds when they were slaves. he won't slip on the floor. Pat it here and pat it there. Just like a lot of wild people. We didn't know nothing. Didn't like to look at no book.
We said all that, stood on that picket fence all day long, seeing them soldiers going back to Silent Zone and different places. Colored soldiers in droves.
We were slaves. We belonged to people. They sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs and all like that. Have an auction bench and they put you up on the bench and bid on you, the same as you're bidding on cattle, you know.
Well, they taken that poor old woman cat in the peach orchard and whipped her. And, just tied her hand this way, around the peach orchard tree. I remember that just as well, looked like to me, I can, and round the tree and whipped her. And, well, she couldn't do nothing but just kick her feet, just kick her feet. But it just had her clothes off down to her waist, Just didn't have her plumb naked, but they had her clothes down to her waist. And every now and then they'd whip her, and then snuff the pipe out on her, snuff pipe out on her. The embers in the pipe. Where you ever see the pipe smoking.
Blow them out on her?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord, have mercy.
Hello, folks. Are you feeling good this morning? Hope you do. I'm trying to get on my feet again. Feel pretty good. Thankful it's as well as it is. Oh, boys, I'm pleased to see you. I don't know where you come from, but I give you all the welcome I've got to offer you. And I want to tell you that I'm living on the same ground that I've lived on for 75 long years when I come here as an 18-year-old bride. I went to Washington 50 years and a little more ago. I saw all the people around there and been with the presidents. And I learned a great many things up there that I didn't know before. I'll add a little more to it. I was one of the board of lady managers for the Chicago Exposition. And I served my full time in Chicago and learned a good many things over there. I was a delegate to the Tennessee Centennial Exposition. I was a delegate to St. Louis, a juror at St. Louis. I think for a North Georgia cracker of my size and age, I've had a pretty good education on that line. That do all right? I was a 3-year-old girl when the Indians were moved from this country to Indian Territory. I have an indistinct recollection of seeing the red men as they went through the woods, for everything was woods nearly at that time. I have a distinct impression, if a 3-year-old child can have it. Nevertheless, I've been here since that time, and I've seen the march of progress all the way. At that time, we had only stagecoaches, and we only had horses and buggies, and we had lots of footback travelers, usually. Now I've seen it come along all this way, and the airplane goes over my house going on its way, and it's got to be such a common thing, the old girl don't go even out to see if she can look at it.
Mrs. King is an old-age pensioner. She lives alone. Her income is £7.5, £5 pension and £2.5 supplementary benefit.
It does not easy to live on. Could do with a lot more. But what can you do? You can't do anything else. You've got to try and manage. And the coal, and the light, and the gas, and every other little thing. Milk, and wind is £7.5 goes nowhere. Sometimes I've got to sit down and think what I'm going to do, or what am I going to get. The weekend I go short of everything. Sugar and tea and all. If I had £10 a week, I'd go and get a little extra, and I'd have a little extra in my food cupboard. And instead of getting chops on a Sunday, I'd get a joint, and I'd have a little outing, go out somewhere. I'd enjoy myself a bit better, because I'd know I wasn't leaving anything short, as long as I had me rent to pay.
In 1966, a survey showed that 59% of old people living alone had particular difficulty in paying for either food, clothing, rates, or fuel.
Every pensioner should get up to £10 a week, because they've got to pay the same price for their food and for everything as those that have the big money going in.
39% of pensioners eligible for supplementary benefit do not claim it.
Well, there is a lot of people proud like I am. I think there's a lot, and there's a lot of people that have never troubled them, a lot of old people that have never troubled them with anything. But when you don't ask, you don't get, as I said before. So you don't know what you can get. And I had the chimney, I had the sweep on Friday. No, Saturday morning sweep. That was 12 and 6. I got told I could have got that, but I wouldn't bother.
Has paying the sweep made you short this week?
Yes, well, that's made me short.
So what will you go without this week?
Well, I'll have to do the best I can and get me pension in the morning. Get on with it. And when I get me pension, it goes in one hand and out the other.
At least 30% of the elderly are showing clinical evidence of undernutrition.
Do you ever get lonely?
Well, sometimes, but I keep myself going. I don't let myself get lonely. I read or I clean up or do a bit of ironing or something that I don't until I go to bed. The only thing is I'm afraid of is the night. I worry in case I do take bad. I'm not so bad if I get out of bed and get to call somebody, but there's times that you couldn't get out of bed and you're left there. As I've been reading in the papers about old age pensioners getting found dead.
60,000 old people died last winter as a result of diseases associated with cold.
Well, I'm a stranger up here. My son lives out in Ditton, and the rest live down north. John lives down north, but he comes up here every night.
Do you get any help from your relatives?
No, I've never asked. I never troubled them. If they come up, I never let them know whether I've got it or whether I haven't. The only one that is very good, she was good to me at Christmas, was the nephew's wife. Because she's got a business and she sent me some stuff up.
But otherwise you get by on your own?
I get by on my own. Well, it's best to be independent. You don't want to say anything about you then. You don't trouble anyone.
Mrs. Manning, where were you when the ship struck the iceberg?
In the steerage class.
You were emigrating to America?
Yes, I was coming over here to my sister.
If I may ask, how old were you then?
I was 16, going on 17. Be 17 in October.
When did you first realize how serious the trouble was?
Oh, I didn't until I got to this country. I thought it was part of the trip, to tell you the truth. I didn't realize that there was any danger.
You didn't realize there was any danger?
No, I thought that was a pretty hard way to get here, but I didn't really think it was as bad as it was until after.
When the alarm was sounded, what happened?
Well, I was asleep at the time, and I thought then the ship had landed. So I thought we were here in this country.
Then you went up on deck?
And then I went up on deck, and then we were told to go down, that there was a piece of ice on deck, and that when they get it off of it, everything would be all right, to go down and go to bed.
How did you escape?
Well, we were standing on the steerage, third class they call it, and then we couldn't get up to second. And of course then there was one man with us, and he was our guardian angel, and he said, for God's sake, let the women up. So at that I got up.
And then you
second.
And then you got into a lifeboat?
And no, then I had to go to first cabin. The lifeboats were only going from first cabin. So there was a man on the second deck, and he asked me to go on his shoulder, and I climbed over, and then I think it was the last boat that was going out.
Did you take
They didn't want to let me on because there was too many on the boat already.
But you got into the boat?
But I said to the man I'd like to go with my sister because there was a neighbor with me, and I thought he'd feel it. Because I didn't want to lose the crowd. I didn't really think it was any danger, but I thought I'd miss them in the dark. You know, it was very dark.
Did you see the ship sink?
Oh, yes. I was looking at it sinking when we were in the lifeboat, because we were in the lifeboats for 9 hours.
And then which ship rescued you?
Carpathia. Carpathia picked us up then early in the morning, about 9 o'clock or something. I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning.
Slocum, I believe you were in charge of the Turkish bath on the Titanic.
I was.
And where were you when the iceberg hit the ship?
I was in bed.
And when did you first realize things were wrong?
Well, naturally the fog woke us up, and everybody got to their feet, and I went into a little passage, and I met the second steward, which was Mr. Dodd, and he said, for God's sake, get some clothes on, get up on deck. I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't know. So, of course, I had a coat on, a nightdress, and we got up on deck, and everybody was most cheerful.
When did you first realize how serious things were?
I didn't think it was serious because I didn't think it was possible a big ship like that could sink. And everybody was busy, and they was lowering the lifeboats, and the crew were marvellous. Everybody was cheerful.
And how did you escape?
In the last lifeboat, and I didn't want to go.
And then, of course, you realized that things were very serious.
Yes, I did.
And did you see the ship sink?
I did. It sank very quickly.
That must have been a most dramatic sight.
It was, because you could just see the lights going down and down.
Did you hear the music playing?
I did.
Almost till the end?
Till the end, I heard them play, you know, Nearer My God to Thee.
Nearer My God to Thee.
And I met a steward, and he said, "You are, grab hold of this," and it was a baby. So I took the baby, and then when they lowered the last lifeboat, I didn't want to go. And they said that one of the other stewards, and Mr. Wheat, he was helping lower them, and Mr. Murdoch, he was the chief steward, and he was shouting out, "Ladies, children and women first." They was marvellous.
And you took the baby?
I took the baby, and I didn't want to go, so they said, "Come on." And I went down in the last lifeboat, and there was, I think there was 72 in it. And you could hear the ice crash in the sides of the boats.
You saw ice all round you?
Oh yes, crashing, and the water, the ocean was as smooth as a pond.
And you were in the water until, you were in the boat until
the
daylight?
Next, yes, quite daylight. And then we was brought on to New York, and the Lapland brought us back to Plymouth, the survivors, which had to come back. So then, of course, she was kept there a little while and then brought on to Southampton. Of course, that was very sad because everybody thought she knew somebody who was lost, and I had so many friends on there, and you couldn't tell them anything.
There was no impact as such. It was just like jamming your brakes on a car. And that was that. She stopped. We had a porthole open, and I looked out, and the sky was clear, the stars were shining, the sea was dead calm. And I thought, I don't know, I couldn't understand it. So I came out of my cabin, and I thought, well, I'd go forward. And I went forward to the well deck on the starboard side, and I could see ice in the well deck. There's no sign of iceberg then, because she'd passed us. And the lights were shining on the water from the portholes, and no sign of damage above waterline. And of course, what had happened, we'd slipped over the iceberg. And although she was supposed to be unsinkable with a double bottom, the iceberg had cut her from forward on the starboard side to the engine room, right through her two bottoms. And we had orders to get the lifeboats out. And of course the same old order, women and children. And we swung the lifeboats out and gradually filled them up. First boats were away on the port side. The first boats away didn't have many passengers on board. They were afraid to go down. There was a 70-foot drop to the water, and they didn't think she was going to sink. And a few of the first boats on the port side got away with half filled. Don't forget, we had 16 lifeboats, and they each carried 50. And if they'd been filled, we could have saved 800, whereas we only saved 500. So you can imagine there were many seats in the first lifeboats vacant. Then I had orders to go down the storeroom with a gang of men and get all the biscuits we could find. Well, when we got back up onto the boat deck, we couldn't get near the lifeboats. Some people were scrambling to get in and being pushed back. By that time, she was listing very badly to port, and we couldn't get the starboard boats down. But before I got my lifebelt on, I met a young couple, and I can tell you her name. It was Mrs. Clark. They'd spent their honeymoon in France, and we'd picked them up at Cherbourg. And she was having trouble with her lifebelt. So I fixed that on to her, and I said, I think you better get into a lifeboat. And there was one in the port, on the port side. So she said, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to leave my husband. So I said, well, it's just a precautionary measure. You get in, your husband will follow later on. And I got her away, and that was that. And then I picked up my own lifebelt and put it on. Then the third-class passengers were coming up. There were 700 of them, and they swarmed the decks and filled up the decks. And I thought, well, I'd done all I possibly could. I'd helped them all I could. And I thought, well, now I'll go up and get out of all this scrumming and go on the poop deck. And she was sinking fast then. And all of a sudden, she lifted up quickly, and you could hear everything crashing through her. Everything that was movable was going through her. And then she went down and seemed to come up again. So I thought, well, now I'm going to leave. And I was hanging on to a board. We had two boards, starboard and port, which said, keep clear of propeller blades. And I was hanging on to one of these, and I was getting higher and higher in the air. And I thought, well, now I'll go, and I dropped in. I had a lifebelt on, and I hit the water with a terrific crack. And luckily, I didn't hit anything when I dropped in. There were bodies all over the place. And then I looked up at the Titanic. So the propellers were right out of water, the rudder was right out, and I could see the bottom. And then gradually she glided away, and that was that. That was the last of the Titanic. I didn't want to die, and I didn't see much chance of living, but I was gradually getting frozen up. And by the grace of God, I came across a lifeboat, and they pulled me in. And there was a fireman dead in the bottom. There was about a foot of water in this boat. There was another man who was trying to. He seemed to be trying to get away from it again. I don't know what was the matter with him. They were tying him down, and the rest were women and children. And I sat on a seat, and I sat next to Mrs. Clark, the girl I'd put into a lifeboat. And she said, the first thing she said, have you seen my husband? So I said, no, I haven't, but I expect he'll be all right. Anyway, I was in a pretty bad way then, as you can imagine, frozen solid almost. And she wrapped me round with a cloak. She had some sort of blanket or a coat on. Anyway, I think she probably saved my life, I don't know. But I saved hers. At least I think I might have done. I think I did. And she saved mine. Then, first light, the Carpathia came along. The Carpathia was about 7,000 tons, and they were going to the Mediterranean, absolutely loaded. And they took us all on board, took us to New York, and that was that.
I believe you've even got a watch that you were wearing at the time when you went into the water.
Yes, but I couldn't afford anything better in those early days. Here it is.
That says 2:20. What time was it when you went into the water, do you think?
I think about 2 o'clock. I think it lasted. It was frozen up like I was. I think it lasted for about 20 minutes in the water.
Does talking about this incident bother you like you have been today?
Talking about it? I should probably dream about it tonight. Have another nightmare. You'd think I'm too old for that, but you'd be amazed. You lie in bed at night and the whole thing comes round again.
It would be very hard to describe the Somme. I don't know that there's ever been a battle like it. I mean, you had two armies in static positions. The movement of either of them would be about 200 yards, the difference between the two basic front lines. And the Somme, which had been built and rebuilt as a battleground by the British, initially to relieve pressure on Verdun, but it became a cesspool. And there were divisions attacking and counterattacking for months. For instance, the Irish Ulster Division, the 36th, attacked in that area on the 1st of July, and they were massacred. They made a slight gain, which is all anyone could hope to do at this point, but there was an aimless gain. I mean, you achieved very little. The towns of Guillemont and Ginchy, it didn't exist as such. They were merely pieces of earth that people said, that's Ginchy.
Well, what about your own action, which won you the MC? And I presume that your losses were great in that action, in your own battalion.
Yes, they were very, very big. When I joined the battalion of the 9th Dublin Fusiliers, there were 28 officers, I believe, and about 900 men. I wasn't long with them until we were in action, a matter of days. But at the time of joining, I was a temporary second lieutenant, and I was probably the most junior officer in the battalion. Amongst the battalion, Tom Kettle was also in another company, B Company. But we didn't. It was a christening of war, if you wish. But we had passed up through, getting them to our forward position, we passed through literally miles of guns, all classes and types, wheel to wheel, which were to concentrate their barrages on the Germans for our advance. They did so, and it was deafening. It also was a time when we went under the first of creeping barrages. This was the beginning of this method of advancing in warfare, and it had a doubtful effect because we lost as many, I think, through
your own gunfire.
Well, they could have fallen short. You see, the distance was 250 yards to Ginchy. We lost a lot of men. We gained our objective. And when we had gained the objective, I found that there was only one other officer of my unit that I could collect.
Out of the 28 that had gone?
Out of the entire battalion. So we got together and tried to concentrate the men that had strayed around the place. The place was in a state of chaos. And we got together around about 120 men. And I placed them in, I happened to be the senior officer of the two of us. I placed them in different positions around our area and reported back by runner that we'd got the objective that we were set. And we got a message back to stand fast. So while we were there, it was nightfall. Do you wish me to describe all this?
Well, what I would like to know is really how many men were left at the end of this
actually,
1 or 2 day
I'd rather
action?
abbreviate this because it's lengthy.
Yes.
When we finished, when we were relieved by a battalion of the Welsh Guards. And that was about 24 hours after our attack. I marched out with the only officer, with 98 men.
Out of the 900?
Out of 929 officers.
And this was terrible though it may sound, a rather common enough thing in this,
well, it was,
in this awful
because
war.
It wasn't, in this war, when you had casualties, they were usually fatal, because any form of gun wound without the advantages that now exist, there was no penicillin in those days, there were no sulfa drugs, so that any bad wound or injury turned gangrenous.
And killed you.
And usually they died or had arms and legs amputated. It was a serious thing. The amount of deaths was out of all proportion to what succeeded.
One day we got orders to storm a French position. We got in, and my comrades fell right and left of me. But then I was confronted by a French corporal, he with his bayonet at the ready, and I with my bayonet at the ready. For a moment, I felt the fear of death. And in a fraction of a second, I realized that he was after my life exactly as I was after his. I was quicker than he was. I tossed his rifle away and I ran my bayonet through his chest. He fell, put his hand on the place where I had hit him, and then I thrust again. Blood came out of his mouth and he died. I felt physically ill. I nearly vomited. My knees were shaking, and I was, quite frankly, ashamed of myself. My comrades, I was a corporal there then, were absolutely undisturbed by what had happened. One of them boasted that he had killed a Paulie with the butt of his rifle. Another one had strangled a captain, a French captain. A third one had hit somebody over the head with his spade. And they were ordinary men like me. One of them was a tram conductor, another one a commercial traveler. Two were students, the rest were farm workers, ordinary people who never would have thought to do any harm to anyone. How did it come about that they were so cruel? I remembered then that we were told that the good soldier kills without thinking of his adversary as a human being. The very moment he sees in him a fellow man, he is not a good soldier anymore. But I had in front of me the dead man, the dead French soldier, and how would I like him to have raised his hand? I would have shaken his hand, and we would have been the best of friends, because he was nothing like me, but a poor boy who had to fight, who had to go in with the most cruel weapons against a man who had nothing against him personally, who only wore the uniform of another nation, who spoke another language, but a man who had father and mother and a family perhaps. And so I felt. I woke up at night sometimes drenched in sweat because I saw the eyes of my fallen adversary, of the enemy, and I tried to convince myself what would have happened to me if I wouldn't have been quicker than he, what would have happened to me if I wouldn't have thrust my bayonet first into his belly. What was it that we soldiers stabbed each other, strangled each other, went for each other like mad dogs? What was it that we, who had nothing against them personally, fought with them to the very end and death? We were civilized people after all. But I felt that the culture we boasted so much about is only a very thin lacquer which chips off the very moment we come in contact with cruel things like real war. To fire at each other from a distance, to drop bombs is something impersonal. But to see each other's white in the eyes and then to run with a bayonet against a man, that was against my conception and against my inner feeling. Anything else?
That's beautiful. Cut.
How come you went into the British Army anyway when you were...
Well, I had an elder brother. There was 5 of us, actually. 5 brothers. We all served in the 1914-18 war. And the eldest fella, he was a long-headed guy, you know. When we'd be reading Hans Andersen's fairy tales, he'd be reading the Hans-Ruth History of the World. And he was always on about what a wonderful world was out there, and see the world and all this kind of thing, see? Well, the only way we could see the world was if somebody else, Spence, joined the army. He finished up, he was Battery Sergeant Major B Battery, the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. Joe, he was second eldest brother, he was a machine gunner of the Irish Guards. And Pat, he was in the Royal Engineers, he was blown up at Vimy Ridge. Frank, he was in the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, he was killed at Moreland Court on the Somme. He was killed in the morning time, and I got gassed at the same place on the same day, in the evening.
Same day?
Yeah. So the only way to see the world and see all these wonderful things that the elder brother used to be talking about was join the army.
You told a lie, Jack.
I did.
You said you were 18.
Yeah.
And you were only 16.
I know that. Well, that's the only way I could get into the army. It wasn't me that really thought that up. It was a sergeant named MacDonald, a very smart-looking man who was a recruiting sergeant in Brunswick Street in Dublin. And he said, Jack, your age up, all that kind of thing. He said, and you'll be able to pass all right. So I did. So I had an army age and I had another age, see, so that's it.
You never had any idea what you were getting into, Jack, did you?
Well, I thought I was going to see the world, but I damn near seen the second world, the other world.
How deep were trenches?
10, 12 feet.
Deep?
Yeah.
And
because you had to have a head cover.
Yes.
And then there was the steps for getting up and going over the top.
Yes. And tell me about going over the top. I'm told that the men shouted when they were going over the top.
You shouted because, I'm going to tell you something, Kay. I never went over the top that I wasn't scared. I was scared stiff. And everyone shouted because more or less we were all scared. And you shouted because it kind of helped you.
Yeah.
See? And you shouted all the way until you got into action.
And they were shooting at you all the time?
Oh, yeah. So the shells were bursting, the bullets were flying. You hear the whine of the bullets and the bursting of the shell and all that kind of thing.
And how bad was it? Tell me about the wet and the smell.
Look, yeah, I am an old contemptible, as you know. I'm the only one in Ireland. The 1940, let me say this much, Gay. I think myself, it's my opinion, that the British Army that went overseas in August 1914 was up till then the finest army the world has ever seen. Surely we proved it in 1914 and the winter of 1914-15. We weren't living actually in the sense of the word. It was just punishment. Can you imagine yourself standing out there in all kind of weather, hail, rain, frost and snow? Any bit of food you got, you ate it, go, mind you, that's another thing. If you had a bit of food you were saving for a rainy day, the only safe place for it was in your stomach. Because the rats would find it no matter where you put one. What with the lice eating the flesh off the live ones and the rats scourging themselves on the bodies of the dead, it was a lovely, real happy time, wasn't it?
And how far away would the bodies of the dead be from where?
They'd be all around you. You see, as the lads got killed, you couldn't bury them right away, because if you tried to try and bury them right away, that was an easy target for the jerrys, and you'd finish up one of them. So you had to wait until the proper time when you had the real chance of saving your life to bury them.
And meanwhile, they lay there.
They lay there for weeks sometime. Don't know. It could be a friend of yours. It could be a relative of yours. The rat scourging them, and you standing there looking at them through a loophole, standing on the fire step. And I tell you, it was just sheer punishment. There's a lot of people don't know it, but we went hungry in the early days. The early days of trench warfare. Yeah. Now, of course, from Mons on to the Somme until the Yane, it was all open warfare. See?
But you went hungry in the trenches.
We went hungry. Now, it wasn't through any fault of our supply columns. I'll tell you how it happened. If, in the evening time, the shelling wasn't too heavy, we could hear the transport behind the German lines, you know, moving around and coming up with the supplies for the trenches and the rations for the lads, see? And, of course, they could hear ours. Well, it seemed to be that it was a signal for the artillery on both sides to open up and blow them off the roads. Too damned often they were successful, with the result that 9 or 10 o'clock at night, the word had come along, sorry lads, no rations tonight, transport couldn't get through. Well, I think that actually died away by mutual consent. Because if the lads in the trenches couldn't get food and they couldn't get the munition and supplies they wanted, what was going to happen? And it gradually died out. And after that, supplies were pretty regular.
So you didn't shell their supply trains and they didn't shell yours?
No, it died out. Because what were you going to do with the men in the trenches if they couldn't get food or couldn't get the equipment?
Yes. And did the rats attack you in the trenches where you were?
That was one thing, Gay, you come to mention that we had to be very careful of. Not to leave any wounded out. Get the wounded in, get them in somewhere where they could be, because the rats have been known to attack helpless wounded. They could be alive, but the rats would attack them. As a matter of fact, there was one night, we were out of the line at the time, and we were in an old loft. And a young lad I knew very well, he was lying alongside me this night sleeping. He woke up and he was shouting he'd been bit. Well, we lit a bit of candle, and right enough, a rat had taken a piece out of his cheek. So we put a first field dressing on, and the morning time you seen the doctor. Now, it just shows you how poisonous they were. In 2 days' time, that young lad was dead, and his head and neck and that had swelled up and gone black. So it just shows you the poison in the rat bite. I often wondered how many Tommies really got killed by rat bite. Because they were there were millions. There were millions. Now, that's something I'd like to tell you, Kay. I got gassed when my brother got killed the same day on the Somme, up in Marlincourt on the Somme. Well, I think I went grey-haired overnight, worrying would I be permanently blind. I'll tell you how I got gassed in the first instance. We were on a working party this day, see, bringing stuff up to the line of that, and Jerry twigged us and he put over a shell barge. Now, there was no gas around. I had my gas mask on, hung over my right shoulder, and the gas mask was down here on my left hip. And during the barge, I got a smack in the hip. It was a real hard one because it knocked me into a trench hole about 6 feet away. But right away, I had my pants down to see where I was wounded. But I wasn't wounded, no blood or anything like that, see. Never gave it a thought. Carried on that day. And now that night, there was a bunch of us in an old, disused German gun emplacement. Because we'd driven the Germans back, you see. And an officer came along, he said, hey lads, he said, there's 10 or 12 men out there, he said, wounded. Go out and bring them in. So of course right away we went out to get the wounded in. Now when we went out, Jerry put over gas shells. Of course as soon as you sniffed the gas, everyone shouted, put on your gas mask, lads. Well, I put on my gas mask and that kind of thing, the same as everybody would. And I hadn't it on, about 2 minutes. And I began to get sick into my gas mask, you know. Then my ears began to pain me, and I began to find it difficult to breathe. So I either pull the plastic thing off or suffocate. So I pulled it off, of course, scattered around for a while and went down. Luckily, a lad came along just as I went down, and he said, "Where do you hit, mate?" So I said, "I'm not hit, I'm certain gassed." And as he bent down to help me, he said, "No wonder you're gassed, mate." He said, "There's a big piece of German shell in the metal container of your gas mask. That's what hit me early on the day."
That's what hit you.
So, of course, God, I never felt so bad. Oh, my eyes, my throat, everything like that. Well, anyway, another lad came along between them that took me down to the casualty clearance station. It was only just a little way down the reserve trenches. Now, I remember the medical officer coming on there and taking my particulars from my identity disc. But I must have been unconscious for a long time because I don't remember anything else until I was in the 2nd Canadian General Hospital down at Leith Freeport. That was right down on the coast. And I said, "Where am I?" And somebody said, "You're in the 2nd Canadian General Hospital at Leith Freeport, see?" Well, I must have been unconscious all that time. And it took days for me to come to the front line right down there. Well, anyway, there was a medical officer came to see me, so he said, "How long have you been out here?" So I said, "Since August 1914, sir." So he said, "Where do you come from?" So I said, "Marlincourt on the Somme." "No," he said, "I don't mean where you come. Where's your home?" I said, "My parents live in Dublin." Well, I remember nothing after that, but I was getting shaken around a bit, and I asked where I was, and a man's voice said, "You're at the North Wall in Dublin." Well, now I'd come all the way from the 2nd Canadian General and been put on a Red Cross convoy and all that to Dublin. So I must have been unconscious all that time.
Until you got back to Dublin.
But anyway, I finished up in a hospital in Dublin Castle. It was a private hospital. And
looking back on it now, Jack, it was all senseless, wasn't it? Or do you think it was senseless? What's your attitude to it now?
Well, my attitude to it now, now how is this for loyalty? In 1915, when things began to get good, you know, we were getting reinforcements out and things like that, you see, those of us who had been out for months got a 7 days leave. That was 7 days leave from the time he left the trenches until he returned to the trenches. Now, how is this for loyalty? Of all the lads in the unit that got that 7 days leave, I was one of them. Every one of them was back within the 7 days. There wasn't one deserted, although they had every opportunity to desert. That's loyalty.
To your pals.
That's right, loyalty to your oath.
To your oath.
And to your pals.
And you never thought of deserting or anything like that, or making a run for it?
Never entered my head, and I don't suppose it entered anybody else's head.
And do you ever think now of the Germans that you shot, Jack?
Did that what?
Do you ever think of the Germans you shot now?
No, certainly not. What do you think? It was dead. Kill or be killed. You killed them or they killed you, one or the other. What the hell? It was just a game. War is war, Gay. You kill or be killed. No, you've no remorse for anything like that.
You were just in it up to your ears and that was it?
You were just doing what you took the oath to do. Without favour, affection, malice or ill will. Huh?
Nothing personal?
Oh, boy, nothing.
I don't know. I've lived a good life. I mean, I've had a lot of happiness, smiling, telling everybody that everything was beautiful every day. If I went into my church and didn't say everything was beautiful, they'd think I was sick. And I'm not that way. I mean, I sincerely believe in this old world that everything is beautiful. I mean, if I wake up in the morning and see these plants out here and all those flowers that are in there and the green grass on the ground, that's beautiful. And people don't realize what they have. They bitch about it. They do. And then nowadays, I am so upset that the things we did and the things we fought for and the boys that died for it, it's all gone down the drain. Our country's gone to hell in a handbasket. We haven't got the country we had when I was raised. Not at all. Nobody will have the fun I had. Nobody will have the opportunity I had. It's just not the same. That's not what I was. That's not what they died for. It's just not it. Darling, I'm so sorry. I'll be all right. Just takes me time to get over it because why me? See, sitting here like this, see, all this going on.
It's crazy.
Listen, it's just, Emily, it's just not the same. That isn't what we fought for. Oh well, I should be worried about it, I guess. I'm 100 years old, they say.
That one will be
I'm
my
not,
fight.
I worry about it. Yes, I worry.
That will be my fight. Yeah. For sure.
Well, okay, you just remember everything's beautiful, and live every day to the fullest. Just enjoy everything you possibly can.
The theater is a great love of mine, and I find it tremendous recreation reading. About the 18th century, I first became attracted to it, or whether first or finally, was when I started wondering about women. Since my chief interest as a writer, as a director, has always been in more or less in the female and the male scoundrel. Because to write about a male who's not a scoundrel is impossible. He's impossibly dull. That's why there's never been a successful movie that I know of about a minister. They're allowed to get married, right? Priests can't. That makes priests a sex symbol on the screen. I'm about to divert myself, but I was once called to Louis Mayer's office, and there was a representative of the Protestant churches of America. And Mayer always called upon me to do these impossible things. His nickname for me was Harvard, although I went to Columbia. He called me Harvard, because I think that's the only college he knew of. And the representative of the Protestant ministry was there to say, wait a minute, why are all of these films, we're not objecting, mind you, that Bing Crosby, Spencer Tracy, Ingrid Bergman, nuns, priests, we think that's fine. But why don't you make a film about a Protestant minister? And Mayer said to me, answer the man. And I realized suddenly that, of course, an audience of women come into a theater and they see Spencer Tracy or Bing Crosby as a priest. Now, what is the first thought that must cross the young woman or the young mind is, he's not allowed to have anything to do with women. Therefore, by next decade, he becomes a real sex object. And similarly, when you get a beautiful woman like Ingrid Bergman, who has taken the vows of chastity, this makes her a very exciting female, particularly when you know she's having an affair with Rossellini.
But besides the women, is it also the rationality that you like in the 18th century? Because your films show an extreme rationality with the fear of something passionate coming
Well, I think I told you, one of the 3 slogans that my father gave me to live by, which I've tried to live by, one of the most important is the 18th century slogan of Dr. Johnson's Relieve Your Mind of Cant. And cant is, quite frankly, the motivating word for most of what we do today. We are living in an age of growing illiteracy, like a growing cancer. And we're also living, I am afraid, in an age of, the French had a great word for it, le précieux ridicule. Show me 100 young people who are going to the university and say, I want to study film. And I will show you 95 who just don't want to study, period. They want to sit and look at movies. So this is what I think Dr. Johnson meant by Kant. Not, the evasion of the truth. And the more we live in it, the more we evade the truth. And this is what I try to do with my films, but within the limits I'm permitted to. I like to look at the truth of the milieu in which I live and work. You can look at it wittily, and I think sometimes you have to look at it with wit, because otherwise you'd cry.
Now I want to change the subject and ask you about something quite different, because there was one episode in your career which has puzzled a lot of people. Why did you decide some years ago to go to Hollywood and work in the Hollywood machine?
Well, I was not working in poetry at the moment, and I needed to earn money.
Did Hollywood either succeed in or even seek to lower your standards?
Oh, not for a moment.
How did you ward them off? Because they have, after all, corrupted a great many.
I didn't have to. I only saw people whose behavior was impeccable, who were highly educated, and the sort of people I would know in England.
Is the story of your affection for, or whatever it was, Marilyn Monroe, just a press story, or is it true? Did it really happen?
Well, I tell you what happened exactly. You see, she was brought to see me in Hollywood, and I thought her a very nice girl. I thought that she had been disgracefully treated, most unchivalrously treated. If people have never been poor, perhaps they don't know what it is like to be hungry. That girl allowed a calendar to be made of her, you see. Well, there have been nude models before now. It means nothing against a person's moral character at all. This poor girl was absolutely persecuted by people. I mean, she has, or had, an unfortunate attraction for an extremely unpleasant kind of man, whom she avoided assiduously. I have seen her do that when she was brought to see me. I really did, you see. I mean, she behaved like a lady.
And has she shown pleasure and gratitude, if you like, for the kindness which you showed to her?
Well, indeed, yes. I mean, when she and her husband, whom I have a very great admiration, came to London, they were asked who they wanted to see, and I was one of the first people whom they wanted to see, and they came. But of course we couldn't talk, because every kind of person was just hanging about outside and interfering and all the rest of it, you know, and going and telling lies afterwards. But I saw them again alone in New York, and we had a most delightful talk. And I hope that one day I shall see them alone again.
Now, you do visit America pretty regularly nowadays, and I want to ask you, do you find that the American way of life is a good one for an artist?
Oh, yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, unless one is rushing about screaming, which I don't know anybody who does rush about screaming. You see, it is, there are certain comforts which prevent you from being harassed the whole time. That, I think, is a very good thing. You see, such as I mean, everybody, excepting the very, very poor, have ice boxes and have motors and...
Yes, but with all that mechanization and all the sort of speed with which accompanies it, do you not find that the contemplation which is necessary for your work rather disappears?
No, I've always been able to work perfectly.
And do the Americans treat you with the respect, or do they treat artists with the respect that is their due?
Oh, my goodness me, yes. They're perfectly wonderful audiences. They're so kind. I mean, for instance, after we had had a performance some or other, our photographs were put in the paper. We were not seeking publicity, but I mean, they were put in. And a week afterwards, some young people saw my eldest brother and me standing on a street corner waiting for a taxi, and they ran and got a taxi for us.
Are you as well known in New York and San Francisco as you are in London? Do people recognize you?
At least.
Yes. Do you ever want to be unrecognized as you go about your life?
I want, frankly, not for people to come up and bother me about every kind of trivial thing.
Has it ever occurred to you, I'm sorry to come back to something, but has it ever occurred to you that if you did just once dressed like Garbo in an old Macintosh and a slouch hat, you would go unrecognized?
No, I shouldn't.
You'd rather not pay that price for it?
I should hate to do it. I don't see why I should, because people are impertinent.
Is it your experience that on the whole people are impertinent with the public figures whom they know well and love?
Not everybody. Some are most considerate, but some are extremely impertinent.
Well, now...
I mean, anybody thinks that they have a perfect right to come up and bother me about their own problems.
Problems, yes. Well, now, somebody did once write about you, Dame Edith. Not what she writes, but what she is exerts the real fascination. And that's what I've been trying to find out tonight. Now, before I give you the last word, I want you to listen to 3 most lovely lines which I quote from one of your own poems. The great sins and fires break out of me like the leaves from the bough in the violent spring. I am a walking fire, I am all leaves. Dame Edith, what is that great fire? What is the living thing which all your life has been trying to break out of you?
The great fire, I suppose, is a humble but unworthy love of God, and certainly a great love of humanity. And to be an artist is a terribly painful thing. I mean, the great leaves break out of me. You see, one has a perpetual resurrection in one's life as the art returns to one after long deadness. You see. And of course the fire's always fighting the sins, and well, there one is.
Before we finish, I wanted to ask you a few questions about fashion today, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a really interesting moment in fashion, because everybody seems to be questioning everybody seems to be questioning
yes,
where we've ended up.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much product, there's so many designers, there's so many fashion shows, there's so much waste.
Yeah.
What do you think of the fashion industry, the fashion system now?
For me, fashion business became money business, and they look sexy and messy. And I felt I've been losing my competitor year by year.
In Japan, you mean?
In the world.
In the world.
Especially clothing designer decreasing. Only stylists. They were asked by big maison, big house, and make a show for selling accessories, not for selling their own creation. The majority of business became like that, and I call it mainstream of fashion. I'm not walking in the mainstream. I'm walking in the side dark street. It is quite comfortable. If I joined the mainstream, maybe I was killed. Company
would go down.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think, as an industry, what do you think we should be doing to solve this problem, though? Because it doesn't seem sustainable, to me at least, to continue at this pace with this much volume of things. What's the solution?
I don't know. Don't know. When I speak with young designers, I talk them, shut your computer. Don't look at computer. Don't look at your desire, your future, your favorite thing in computer. If you really want to see real thing, real beauty, you have to go there by walking, and go there and touch it and smell it. Don't use computer. Otherwise, you cannot get real emotion. You need, if you want to create something, you need real excitement, emotion, not superficial vision. So I talk them, be blind. You can copy somebody whom you like very much. You can copy it until the end of the copy. You can find yourself. Don't look too wide. If you look the scene too wide, you lose yourself. You'll be lost. So you young people are not yet really having individuality or strong power. Creating is making life. So if you want to create something, keep resisting to the mediocrity, ordinary thing, against. It's a hard way. It's a life work. Are you ready to sacrifice yourself to create something? I'm asking them.
Okay, there you are. Voices speaking out from the depths of the past, remembering things going back in some cases 150, 200 years old. I mean, if you understood what you were hearing people remembering the deep past. Deep in the sense that, well, the truth is, as someone once said, the past isn't even past. It's still here. These voices that we've recorded are still here. And they are commenting on us. And we need to consider what we have traded away for our conveniences and our ideas today. Not all the time was it worth it. Okay. So, again, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, contribute, and we will meet again. Drovit.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.